Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news as we descend into another circus. The fallout of a very disappointing start to the season, but the fallout between a manager and another player. Jadon Sancho and Erik ten Hag, to be specific. Lots of layers to this. You've got both people putting out public statements, which shows you what a mess Manchester United is. You know, sometimes I say things and I wonder if people are listening. I've been talking about this all summer. Behind the scenes, the club is crumbling, whether that's the ownership, whether it's the board, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's the players. It is not a happy family. It is all over the place, which has led to the bad start to Manchester United season. The lack of energy, the lack of effort, the lack of, synergy, chemistry, whatever you want to call it. This is evident, and it's evident to us, and it's also very evident now when you've got a manager calling out a player and a player instantly putting a statement out. And let's not forget, the statement from Jadon Sancho will completely be against the manager and against the advice of the club. So you've basically got mutiny in the football club again. And when has this happened before? Every bloody year for the last decade. So look, I am going to get into this now. We'll go through the comments. You can get your comments in below on what do you think. I suppose the question is, where do you sit on this? Who do you blame? Because someone has to be blamed for this. It's another embarrassment when we should be talking about the state of the club, the result yesterday, and actually we've got an internal argument again. There is no community in Manchester United. There is no camaraderie. It is all falling apart. And the thing that worries me, and I said this last night on Twitter, is there are players in that football club who've burnt a manager before. Some of them have burnt two. They should have been got rid of in the summer and the club didn't do it. It's not just about keeping bad players at the club. It's about keeping bad apples at the club. And remember who said about bad apples? I think it was Ralph Rangnick. There's a lot of things that Rangnick warned Man United's board about over a year ago. They've not listened to it. And that manager is in danger when he's got players who've got their knives out for him. And I'm not just talking about Jadon Sancho here. I'm talking about a lot of different players. Sancho, you can make your own mind up. We'll make our own mind up. But we know there are toxic players in that dressing room who will revel in this. And it could be the beginning of the end for Erik ten Hag. But let's start at the beginning in relation to what this is all about. So Erik ten Hag was asked after the game yesterday why Jadon Sancho and Scott McTominay were not involved in this game. Scott McTominay is apparently ill, and this is what he had to say on Jadon Sancho. Erik ten Hag's word. On Sancho, performances in training, we didn't select him. You have to reach the highest level every day at Manchester United, and you can make choices in the front line. So in this game, he wasn't selected. Now, look, I think every Manchester United fan has got every right to say that's not acceptable from Jadon Sancho. He costs £75 million. He's on around 300 grand a week, and he isn't good enough to make the bench in a game like that. And Erik ten Hag has got every right to say that, and Erik ten Hag has got every right to pick the team. That's exactly what he's saying. He said, look, what do you want Jadon? What do people want Erik ten Hag to do in this situation? Lie? He was ill. He's got an injury. I mean, if Jadon Sancho's unhappy he's been dropped, he's probably going to put a statement out to say he wasn't ill and he's not injured either. So I don't know what Erik ten Hag is supposed to do in that situation. If he says no comment, people start thinking about the 3 months Sancho missed last year. I've heard people saying Sancho, ten Hag shouldn't throw Sancho under the bus. Well, give us an answer in the comments, please. What is he supposed to say? Because the way Sancho's reacted, I don't think there was anything ten Hag could say that wasn't going to get a statement from Sancho. If he's not ill and he's not injured, he shouldn't lie about it. If he says no comments, it's even worse. I think he's said what he's had to say. And this is why it's important sometimes to think over something. I said this about the sale news on Saturday night. I waited until Sunday purposely, and I've waited till this morning purposely, because I don't know what ten Hag is supposed to do. And ultimately, when you read that comment back, he's basically saying a footballer hasn't had a good week in training compared to Garnacho, Pellistri, Rashford and Antony. He can't put 3 wingers on the bench. And ultimately, as a manager of Man United, he obviously thinks that Rashford, Antony, Garnacho and Pellistri this week are ahead of Sancho. And you get United fans saying Pellistri should be given more game time. So I don't have a problem with it. effectively, Ten Hag hasn't said Jadon Sancho is the worst player in the world, I don't want him at the club. He's basically said, based on his training performance, he's not ahead of the people I've picked this week. Well, I don't really have a problem with that. What are we saying? Jadon Sancho should get picked on reputation. Jadon Sancho should get picked because he played okay as a false nine in pre-season. Jadon Sancho should get picked because he's on 300 grand a week. I don't actually agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. And I think Ten Hag has got every right to answer that question in that way. The bigger issue we'll talk about in a minute is the fact that Ten Hag doesn't want Sancho at Man United and has to keep a player he didn't buy. And that's the real problem here. It's the ownership, it's the board, it's the Mertes, it's the Arnolds who say to Ten Hag, you can't sell that player, and create the player power vacuum that we've seen before with Pogba and Mourinho and other managers. This is down to bad ownership. Pep Guardiola would not be in this position at Manchester City. Jurgen Klopp would not be in this position at Liverpool. Arteta was not in this position at Arsenal. People like Ozil, Aubameyang were removed very quickly and the manager was backed. This is the big argument here. It's not about whose side you're on, Sancho or Ten Hag. You should only be on one side, and that's the manager. The manager must be allowed to manage. Whether you agree with him or not, there's no point in having a manager if you don't let them manage. I look back on the mistakes I made with Mourinho, and if he wanted rid of Pogba and Martial, even though I disagreed with that at the time, he should have been allowed to get rid of them. Because ultimately, if he gets rid of them and then he gets the sack, you go, that's another reason he got the sack. So Ten Hag should be allowed to get rid of the Maguires and the McTominays and the Jadon Sanchos and the Donny van der Beeks. He shouldn't be sat with those four players going into an important season because he doesn't want them. But the board have said, we can't get rid of them. And that's just not acceptable. It wouldn't happen to Klopp, Pep or Arteta. But this is what Jadon Sancho has come out with. Now, you can pretty much guarantee that Erik Ten Hag hasn't had a conversation with Jadon Sancho and Sancho said, Gaffer, I know you said you dropped me because I wasn't playing very well. I'm just going to put a statement out and throw you under the bus. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine, yeah. That's not what happened, and there's no way that the club has said it's okay as well. So Jadon Sancho, United won't admit this because it's going to cause more problems, but Jadon Sancho has basically gone renegade here. He's put a statement out of his own accord, and he should be fined for it. You're on 300 grand a week, mate. You're a Man United player. We've just lost a game of football. The manager said you didn't get picked because you weren't good enough, which is his right. It's not your right to then go and put a statement out and cause a load of problems. So, look, I like Sancho. I think he's a decent player. I don't think he should be at Man United anymore, but I think this was really petulant and bad advised, and it's just another example of the modern footballer who thinks they're bigger than the club, playing for, their own brand. I don't agree with this. And basically he said, please don't believe everything you read. I will not allow people saying things that is completely untrue. I've conducted myself in training very well this week. I believe there are other reasons for this matter that I won't go into. I've been a scapegoat for a long time, which isn't fair. All I want to do is play football with a smile on my face and contribute to my team. I respect all decisions that are made by the coaching staff. I play with fantastic players and I'm grateful to do so, which I know every week is a challenge. I will continue to fight for this badge no matter what. Well, I've got to say, I look at that and I look at the bit where he goes, I believe there are other reasons for this. I'm a scapegoat. And that, I believe I've trained well. And it's a bit like that scene out of The Office, if you've ever seen it, where, David Brent's the office manager and his manager is saying, I'm not happy with your performance. And he said, well, I am happy with my performance, so let's agree to disagree. And his manager says, no, let's agree. I'm right. I'm your manager. I'm not happy with your performance, and it's ultimately my decision that matters. And that's what I read about Sancho there. I've trained well this week. Ten Hag doesn't agree with you, mate. He doesn't agree with you. You're not a scapegoat. You've not trained well this week. And, it's great that you think you did, but the manager thinks that you didn't. It's really that simple. I don't agree with this whole scapegoat. I've trained well. It's completely untrue. It's creating drama at Man United. It's creating the beginning of the end of Ten Hag. It's creating a mutiny. It's really just not that deep. And that's my point. It's really just not that deep. And whoever is advising these footballers, bloody hell, sometimes I wish they'd pick up the phone and say, what do you think what would you do? Whether it's to me or another United fan, because I would say do not put a statement out. Don't put a statement out. At the end of the day, it's just a very quick reaction to. I mean, it was out very quick as well. I think Ten Hag said it, and it was out within an hour of Ten Hag saying that he'd been dropped. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like Harry Maguire when he had the captaincy taken off him, and he puts a statement out about it. Get rid of these players. Ultimately, I know it's really harsh and I know it's really blunt, but we're a football club where it's like an episode of fucking Emmerdale every bloody week. Get rid of these players. Phil Foden gets dropped or Jack Grealish gets dropped. Do we get a statement from them saying what Pep said is untrue? I'm a scapegoat. I've trained really well. No, we are Manchester United. I mean, I said jokingly last night, get Roy Keane in the dressing room. Not as a coach, God no. Just as a bloody somebody to police that dressing room and give everyone a kick up the arse. Because what they are pampered, over the top, egotistical footballers who have people around them who probably even wipe their arse. Like, United have collected the worst set of players we've ever had. Now, there's some good players in there, but they're all impacted by the same thing. This ridiculous ego that will not stand in line and do their bloody job. I've been dropped. I'm sure you've been dropped. Pellistri, Garnacho, Rashford and Antony had a better week than you. He doesn't need 3 wingers on the bench. You didn't have a good week in training. You're dropped. You don't need to put a statement out saying, I did have a good week in training. I'm a scapegoat. There's more to it. It's not even that deep. You've been dropped because Ten Hag thinks there's 4 better wingers than you. Deal with it. It's just, I cannot do with this mentality of player. We had it with Maguire as well. I've got nothing to prove. Like, you have. And getting dropped is brilliant. I love managers who drop people who underperform, because you know what Ten Hag is expecting to happen is for a player to actually respond to that and kick on. But Sancho never does. He has a couple of good games and then he drops again. I mean, and the biggest thing I want to say here is, can everybody just remember here? Can Jadon Sancho remember it? Can the fans remember it? Can the club remember it? And the media that's going to back Sancho and go for Ten Hag remember it? Did Eric Ten Hag spend £75 million on Jadon Sancho? No. Did Eric Ten Hag say give him 300 grand a week? No. This is a problem that Ten Hag has inherited and doesn't want. This is the problem at Manchester United. Ten Hag will wake up this morning and be like, why am I dealing with this shit? I do not want this player. I've tried. I've given him opportunities. I've given him 3 months off. I've given him a pre-season. And he's still not better, in my mind, than Pellistri, Garnacho, Rashford and Antony. I've got no place for this player. I wanted to get rid of him in the summer, and the club is so crap, they've said, we can't get rid of him. It's too big a loss. He's too big of an asset. He's on too big a wage. We can't get rid of him. We can't afford it. And that's the problem with United. We can't afford these decisions. We can't afford to get rid of Harry Maguire. We can't afford to get rid of Jadon Sancho. We can't afford to get rid of Scott McTominay. We can't afford to get rid of Donny van der Beek. And that's just 4 players who are part of the first team. Senior first team players that Ten Hag doesn't want, that the club won't back him up on. And this is the deeper meaning. We beat Arsenal, and this is probably not a bigger issue, but we lose to Arsenal and it's the end of the world. But the reality is it is the end of the world, because these problems are there whether we win or not. You've got 4 or 5 players in that first team squad who are basically toxic to Ten Hag because he doesn't want them, and they know he doesn't want them, and they've got nowhere to go. So this is how you don't run a football club. You never start a project with players that the manager doesn't want, because they will infect the dressing room, and that's what will happen. And a lot of players will be behind Ten Hag, but they can't start. What are they supposed to do with these players? They're going to turn up for training. They're going to have their little cliques. They're going to say their piece. And realistically, that United should be coming out this morning and fining Jadon Sancho 2 weeks' wages. In my opinion, he should be fined 2 weeks' wages, because the club and the manager have to win. And the manager has to be right. And when the manager says, I've dropped him because he didn't train well in the week, and then a player puts a statement out instantly, that player is undermining the manager publicly and causing the manager. There will be people this morning who are starting to think, Man United fans, I'm not behind Ten Hag. I don't like Ten Hag. And that's because of that statement from Jadon Sancho. So look, there may well be other reasons. There may well be, duty of care and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, we're a football club, and we've all been down this road. We can all see where this season's going, and ultimately, we all knew where it was going before a ball was kicked. So, is that on Ten Hag or is that on the ownership? We know that this club is screwed this season. We know that this result yesterday against Arsenal will happen again and again and again. We know we're going to struggle to get top four. I would imagine, on Jadon Sancho's side, just to be fair, there's always two sides to a story. I would imagine he feels pissed off. The England squad's just come out. He wasn't in it. He was never going to be in it. But, that might be a factor. This was a factor last year. If you think about when Sancho went off for 3 months, it coincided with the World Cup squad being picked and he wasn't in it. And that obviously, well, not obviously, in my opinion, not being part of the England squad seems to have an impact on Jadon Sancho. Now, again, that's people around him. He shouldn't be in the England squad. Not being in the Man United team probably has a fact. Look, I get it. He probably thinks he should be starting for Manchester United, and it probably really pisses him off. So when he hears that he's not even on the bench because he hasn't trained well, and he thinks he has, and he probably thinks that, best case scenario, I think Jadon Sancho sits there and thinks, I'm good enough to be in the team. The manager's picking on me. But you've got to remember, Jadon, he didn't buy you. He doesn't want you. He doesn't have to pick you. This is not, I think the way Man United is run, some of these players think they're almost bigger than the club. They've got a divine right to be in the team because they earn more money than people who are ahead of them. That's not how it works. And all the problems in that team at the moment were not bought by Ten Hag. So why should he pick them, is my stance. Look, I'm behind the manager on this. I'm not behind the manager on everything. I back the manager on most things, but I'm behind the manager on this. If it was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, if it was David Moyes, if it was Jose Mourinho, or it was Louis van Gaal, I'd be behind the manager now, because the manager has to be allowed to manage. This is a player the manager wanted to sell this summer. This is a player the manager has been forced to keep. This is therefore a player the manager has decided not to pick. And this is a player that's then thrown him under the bus publicly. What do you want Ten Hag to do? What do you want him to do? What lie do you want him to say in public when he's asked about where Jadon Sancho is? He's answered it honestly. He said, based on training this week, he wasn't ahead of the players have picked. The players come out and said what he said. I think it's a circus at Manchester United. And ultimately, this should not be Sancho versus Ten Hag. There should be a leader in that football club who now comes out and finds the player and puts a statement out. Because we need strong leadership, and we never get it. It's always the manager against a mutiny in the dressing room. And we know this is the beginning of something if it's not dealt with. It's a shame the transfer window's just closed, because ultimately Jadon Sancho should be kicked out on loan now. That's what should happen. But you know what will happen? The same thing that's happened with Maguire. Player power. We've accepted a deal for you, Harry. I'm staying. And then he's playing for Man United again. Sancho will be playing for Man United in a couple of weeks because Ten Hag has lost power. Player power is winning at that football club. I don't want you, well, you've got to keep them. We've got an offer, I'm staying. Player power is winning over Ten Hag again. That's the message. Player power is winning at Man United again. Last season, it wasn't. Ronaldo went, De Gea went. Ten Hag was really strong. It's taken a year for these players to get back control of the club again. And that's on the Glazers, and that's on Richard Arnold, and that's on John Murtough, because they have not backed the manager properly over the summer. They've not cleared the players that are now turning on Ten Hag, in my opinion. Get your comments in below. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to smash a like on the video. We're back at 10 o'clock talking about the sale. We've got Ben Jacobs on. I've got Ben Foster on at lunchtime. Lots going on. Smash a like and subscribe. Get your comments in below. What are your thoughts on this big matter? It's another circus at Manchester United.